Merry meet. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. Welcome to tonight's episode. This episode is about the waxing moon, so we'll be talking a little bit about that, but mostly about the air element tonight, and we're going to get into some breathwork practices for witches at the end. So as always, if you're here live, you can leave me any comments or questions in the feed, and I will get to those at the end of, when I do the Q&A. So we are in day 5 of the new lunar cycle. So this part of the cycle, usually between about days 3 and 7 before we lead up into the first quarter, we're really in a state of planning. It's a very internal state. There's a lot of daydreaming that might go on. And this is where you really want to think about the intentions that you set at the new moon and think about how you could manifest those. How could we bring those out into the physical world? So this doesn't have to be about doing yet. We're still in that kind of state of planning, which is why it really does lend itself so well to this air energy, this mental ability that we have to create within our minds what we hope to bring out into the physical world as a manifestation. So now here's what I wanted to mention though, is around day 5, like we're at, we should be kind of feeling this energy on the upswing as we're kind of moving out of that new moon, dark moon energy. It's a little sluggish there sometimes. And what will happen is that sometimes their energy gets a little bit stagnant here. You can get a little bit stuck. You may have trouble coming out of that dark moon, new moon energy. And you could feel this as being more emotional, being a little bit more weepy, having lower energy than we would kind of expect at this part of the cycle. So if you're experiencing any of those things, just know it's okay. It probably just means that your body is actually still in the releasing mode of that, that dark moon energy. But we do want to help move that along. We don't want to get stagnant here, as I'm going to talk about at the end of the episode when I get into the breath work. It's really important that we have our energy moving through us properly. So any places where we have that tendency to get stagnant, we really want to meet those head on and correct them when we can. So if you are feeling some of these things, kind of low on energy, kind of against the cycle where we're at right now, my best advice would be to get outside. That would be a good thing. Get out in the fresh air, get moving, just a simple walk or a hike or yoga. Any of these things can help you get a new perspective. And I would recommend too, if you're really feeling stuck, try something that you don't normally do. So if you're somebody who does like a lot of walking, maybe try yoga. If you're somebody who does a lot of yoga, try hiking or swimming or something active that's going to make you feel good. My best advice is don't pick something that you think you should be doing in the name of being active when it's something that you know you're not going to like. Like I was a runner when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, but I really don't, outside of sprinting, I don't like running. So putting into practice for me some kind of a running practice, it's not going to be fulfilling to me. So it's really important for you to find an activity that really resonates with you. All right, so I am going to move on and start talking about the air element. So I've done an episode on all the elements up until now. We've done earth, we've done water, we did fire last week, or the week before. Now we've arrived at air. So I'm going to start first by talking about air from the perspective of the chakra system, though I will be doing an entire episode on that later. So I'm just going to briefly touch on it and spend most of tonight talking about the Western metaphysical system that most of us are familiar with. But within the chakra system, air is tied to the heart chakra. And this, in air, in Sanskrit, one word for air is vayu. It is sometimes a bit strange. I remember I found it strange, and other people sometimes find it strange when they hear that air and the heart are connected, because as witches we often think of the heart as being, the seat of emotions, and we think of that usually as water, as the element water. But what's interesting is from the chakra perspective, Air really is the element of expansion, and not only that, it's space and openness. And as the heart expands, especially through our breath, because the heart and the breath are very tied, being right here at the same part of the body, it opens us up to the infinite, to everything that's outside of us, essentially to the soul. And in many ways, you can think of the heart space and the air element that's associated with it as the bridge between the lower energy centers and the upper energy centers, which is essentially the bridge between the material and the ethereal. So in that sense, it makes a lot of sense that the heart and air would be tied together. So I will get into that in a future episode, but for now, let's turn our attention to air in that Western magical metaphysical system that most of us are familiar with. So when we're talking about the element of air, we can associate it with the mind, with intellect, with the breath, with inspiration, new beginnings, breakthroughs, like aha moments. Sometimes it seems like ideas come out of thin air. We have a lot of expressions, right, of things coming out of the air. Communication, travel, logic, and truth. So as far as practicing in a magical system, the tool that is associated with air is usually the athame, the blade, or the sword. Now there are some traditions that associate air with the wand, and then they would associate fire with the sword of the athame. But in my own tradition, and in many of the traditions I've studied under, it seems that most seem to associate the air element with the athame. So in case anybody doesn't know what an athame is or is looking for ideas about an athame, I just wanted to share with you. This was actually my first one, and this is actually a letter opener that was purchased from a just like a New Age bookstore we visited in Boston when I lived there. And as you can see, it has like a little dragon, a little stone, and I literally just used this for years and years as my athame. And actually before this, I should say, before this I used a steak knife. I just tied a ribbon around it. I consecrated it as being a magical sacred tool, and I used that. So you don't have to have a lot of money or a lot of these fancy things to have the tools. A lot of them can be made from things you've got in your home. Or like I said, get a letter opener or something pretty. So, I used this for years because I knew that my athame was out there. I just hadn't found it. And when I moved to LA, there's a lot of pagan and witchcraft and New Age stores around here. I would look at these stores. I never really found one that resonated with me. And then one day I was on a trip in New Orleans and walked into a store, and lo and behold, there it was. It called to me, and I found this. So this is my athame. I've had this for 12 or 13 years now. So one of my patron goddesses is Epona, so it really spoke to me that there's a horse here on the hilt. And typically an athame will have a dark handle and a silver blade. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule, but you'll find that most people usually, that's how they would define the athame. Athames are also usually not used for cutting in the physical plane, but more for use in the magical plane, like casting a circle. I'll use them for, drawing, invoking, or banishing pentagrams, opening and closing the circle if someone has to exit or enter. And the exception to this would probably be if you're a kitchen witch. Kitchen witches will often use their athames in the kitchen when they're making their magic with the food. So it's not hard and fast rules, but I generally use my athame just for a specific purpose in the ritual and cutting things in the etheric plane. So in its highest form, the element of air is really about the expression of truth. And this isn't just individual truth that applies to us. This is also a higher, more elevated truth. Air energy is used during divination for this reason, because divination is us trying to get truth, right, from some source, perhaps outside of us, some might say from inside of us, but we're trying to derive some kind of truth. Now, I do feel that divination is also tied to the water element, and both air and water do have that kind of wet, moist quality to them. So it makes sense that air and water together would work to create divination, make it possible for us. Now, from the perspective of polarity, which we see a lot in things in the world, is the air would be thought of as masculine and projective. And when I've talked about the other elements, I've noted this as well. This doesn't have anything to do with gender at all. It's just simply a way that we qualify this energy, right? That we give it, we differentiate it from the more feminine energies like earth and water. It is more projective and less expressive like they are, or receptive. So the qualities here, as I mentioned, it is hot or warm. It's also moist or wet, and it's that in that respect, hot like the element of fire and moist like the element of water. So you can see how it has a relationship with the other elements. And then what's interesting is we have the element of earth, which it really doesn't have much in common with, but all the elements work together to create the whole. Now, usually we associate air with the direction of east. This all does depend on the tradition that you practiced in or you learned from. So some traditions will put it in different places. In the United States, you will often find it in the east. In fact, I think in many traditions and other places as well. A lot of this has to do with the association with dawn, the rising sun, coming up in the east, facing the east as kind of the beginning, right? And air as being that youthful, joyful, breakthrough, new beginnings kind of element. Now, the season that's associated with the element of air is usually spring, like I mentioned, morning and dawn. And as a part of a person's life cycle, it would be associated with youth, the teenage, the childhood, teenage years. Now, it is also associated with the signs of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, and also with their ruling planets, Mercury, Venus, and Uranus. So if you want to draw in air energy or do what I call air attunement, which I'll be talking about in a moment, you can work with these signs, you can work with these planets and their planetary energies. Now, you can also work with color. So like all the elements, air is associated with a color. In the Western magical system, that color is usually yellow, sometimes light blue to differentiate it from water, which is a darker blue. If we were in the chakra system, though, usually that color is green because that is the color of the heart chakra. So I always say, as a witch, we don't have to be too troubled by the seeming contradictions that we see. There's a time, I think, when air makes a lot of sense being green, especially if I'm working with the heart. And there's a lot of times when air makes sense as being yellow or light blue, especially when I'm working in the magical circle. Now, air is also associated with the sense of smell. Sometimes people say smell, sometimes people say hearing. And in the chakra system, people would usually associate the heart with the sense of touch. So to me, I really feel like you could work with any three of those senses. You just kind of want to be aware of why you're choosing them. So if we think of, the element of air as being associated with smell, that would have to do with the fact that smell is something that travels on the air. If we're going to do a ritual that is using the sense of smell, then that's going to make sense, right? As opposed to if we're working with the heart chakra, then maybe we want to be working with a sense of touch when we're connecting it to air. Now, like all of the elements, there are some positive and there are some more negative qualities or not so positive qualities. So in the positive side, the air element brings in a joyful feeling, youthful, it's humorous and funny, communicative, intelligent. If you know people who have a lot of air in their charts, they probably fall under a lot of these categories. Intuitive, diligent, but there also is that capacity to turn to the more not so positive side. Here, the element of air can become gossipy, and its communication turns into like a more negative side. It can become both boastful, untruthful, selfish, fickle, inattentive. So if you do have if you do have a lot of air in your chart, or you know that air is an element that you resonate with, you can watch yourself too. So when you're feeling those first things, right? Joyful, youthful, humorous, communicative, you know that the air within you is in a good state. But if you see yourself kind of turning to that other side, that would be an indication to you that maybe you need to work on that element, right? And see what's going on. Why is it transforming into its more negative qualities? Now, I mentioned air attunement. So air attunement is when we work with the element in order to attune ourselves to that element. So we would be working with it individually in this sense. So we're not working to necessarily balance our elements when we're doing an attunement. It's more, we've determined that there's something maybe deficient in our air, or we want more of it for a certain reason. And here's what we can do. So there's a lot of ways we can attune to the element of air. So the first thing is we can reflect on what areas of our lives we're living truth versus what areas of our life we are not living our truth or speaking our truth. And that can mean different things for different people, but you really want to think about how much truth there is in your life. So another thing you can do is try to have an open mind. Like we all say we have an open mind, but think about really critically about places where you feel that your mind is a bit closed, and then how do you open that? How could you expand that using that expansive energy of air? We can integrate the qualities of air. So remember earlier I said these are kind of that warm quality and that moist quality. So think about how can we bring in more warmth? Warmth has to do with the dynamic and active side of the element, and the moist and the wet part has to do with that more fluid part. So we want to be dynamic and active, and we want to be flowing. And if we think about how to bring those qualities into our lives, we're immediately, automatically bringing in more of the air element. Another thing we can think about is how easily it is for us to adapt. So are you somebody who can adapt when things change? Are you able to shift form very well? So kind of reflecting on that. Thinking about how we adopt new ideas when old ones don't serve us. So really critically kind of reflecting on, are there any ideas that you hold that are really not in your best interest? And if so, could you shift your perspective? It's all about shifting your perspective. We can work with the sense of smell or hearing, get out in the fresh air. To me, that's one of the best ways to work with air. You can climb a mountain, and I know not everybody lives near a place where they can get to the mountains, and not everybody can physically climb one. But I think that if you can get to a place where you can get to a higher elevation, even if that's going up in a building that is has higher levels, right? So there's a time several years ago that I did a challenge where I climbed the US Bank Tower here, and I think it's 100 stories, and it's really something else when you get up to the top and you see the expansiveness. So if you haven't been up to the top of something in a while, see if you can take a trip somewhere and do that. And it really does. It changes your perspective. You can see things from a new view, and that can be enough to kind of shake you up and really get you attuned with the energy of air. Also, from a higher place of elevation, we can feel the wind blow through us in a different way. But even on the low ground, if it's windy outside, get out in the wind, really feel it blow over you. There is a place in Sedona that I was gifted on a trip. A guide showed me this place, and she took me there, and it's called the Amitabha Stupa. So a stupa is like a monument that is built in the Buddhist faith, and the legend says, or I guess the backstory says, that if you sit at a stupa, if you sit in front of it and you allow the wind to blow over the stupa, it's particularly cleansing and clearing when it reaches you. So we would sit there for quite some time and just let the wind blow over us, and it does so much for renewing your sense of everything, and lifting the spirits and really infusing you with the energy of air. So I don't know if there are any around the places that you go, but just any place where you can find where the wind can blow over you is just so magical. So another thing we can do is consider what mental things that you consume. So this one's kind of an interesting one, and it's going to be a different one for everyone, but you really want to think about, what do you take in on TV, on the radio, anything you listen to on the internet, thinking also about the people that you are near and the kind of energy they have, the kind of thoughts that they project out to you. So everything that we consume it's not just about food and water, it's about everything that comes in, and it really has this effect on us elementally. So besides that, we can work with animals that are associated with the element of air, particularly birds like crows, ravens, eagles, I would say hawks, but any type of bird, bats, insects, dragonflies, butterflies, bees. We can work with deities that are associated with the sky or with the element of air, so like Uranus, Zeus. Now a lot of these are masculine, but there are a few feminine ones here. We got Hera and Juno. There's also Jupiter, Mercury, Thor, Newt, Odin, a lot on the list. So you can also, if you're interested in that and deity is part of your practice, you can just Google what are the deities associated with the air element and pick one that calls to you. We can wear yellow or blue, which is always a great way, bringing that color into your surroundings. You can use crystals that are yellow or light blue. So I really like citrine or yellow calcite are two of my favorites for working with the air element. Fluorite, quartz, kyanite is a beautiful light blue, usually blue lace agate. We can use incenses. So the incense itself, in general, is connected to the element of air. And there are also incenses that are associated with air. So it's kind of like getting a double air when you burn an incense that's also associated with air. So these would be like anise, lavender, lemongrass, cedar, birch, and acacia, but that's just a few. So you can always look and find more if you want to, bring the element of air in through incense. Now, we also want to really pay attention to the thoughts and ideas and words that we have, that the things that are going on in our mind, because they do have such great power. There's a study in 2020 that said that people have more than 6,000 thoughts a day. And prior to that, there's many places I've seen where it says that we have more like 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day. But even at 6,000, what was found in the study, that is a lot. Now here's the startling part, that for most people, 80% of those thoughts are negative and 95% of them are repetitive. So most of the thinking that we do is waste. It's just waste, and it is damaging in a lot of ways to us. So obviously this is problematic because our minds are so much more powerful and have more potential than this to be weighed down by these negative and repetitive thoughts that serve no positive purpose. So what do we do about this? So for me, as I mentioned earlier, you want to think very carefully about what you consume, and you want to think very carefully about the people that you're around and the thoughts that they have and the ones that they project to you, either through their actions or through their actual words to you. So just really think about it. Are your experiences and what you're bringing into your mind, is it more negative or is it more positive? And really be honest with yourself about it. Okay, so, and it's okay if you find that there's a lot of negativity that's coming in, that you yourself have a lot of negative thoughts. That's okay, most of us do. But now that we know that, we're in a position where we can do something about it. So one of the best ways I have found is to work with the breath. So I'm going to spend the rest of the episode here talking about that. Now, I plan to put out a whole kind of segment on breath work for witches, get into this in more detail. So this is just kind of a little crash course on it. But I want to start by defining a few things. So first, the word prana. You might have heard this before. Prana is Sanskrit for breath. If we break it down, actually, let me pause for a second. I'll come back to that in a moment. There are other words that we use for the breath, or for the kind of this life force energy. So another meaning for prana besides breath is life force energy. It permeates everything around us. And if you look at other systems, different magical systems in different places, there is a word for this. It just might be different. So for example, qi, if you study Chinese medicine or anything like that, qi is also this energetic force that moves through the body, that is, everything around us is composed of. There's other words like pneuma, odic force. It all depends on what tradition you're coming from, where you've studied. Life force energy, anima, vital force. It doesn't really matter what we call it. I'm going to call it prana here tonight. But what it is, it's basically that thing that animates us. So if you look at a body that has lost its life, it has lost this. It still has some, because we do keep some of that prana. We actually take prana in when we eat something, anything, whether it's an animal or whether it's a plant. Everything contains this prana. But as the body dies and the soul leaves the body, more and more of this prana leaves as well. So it really is what sets us apart from those things that do not have life. As I said, it permeates everything, and we take it in various ways. So as I mentioned, through the foods we eat, through everything we consume, we take in this life force energy. And we mostly get it from the air we breathe, and this is usually the easiest way that we can control it. So besides the physical body, we have multiple subtle bodies, and the first one underneath the physical body is the breath body. So this is called the pranamaya kosha. So if we break that word down, we have prana, which means breath, right, life force. And we have maya, which means body. So this is the life force breath body. And what's really interesting here is that this is our energetic body. So when we're working energetically, we are in this subtle body. We're not in the physical body, we're in the energetic body. And these bodies are like layered on top of each other. So I'm going to do another episode eventually where I'll get into all the different subtle bodies. But for now, just kind of understand this is the first of the subtle bodies. Now, in this pranamaya kosha, or this energy body, this is where we get our energetic blockages, and most of us get these. Now, sometimes it's easy. We can actually dislodge these blockages without doing very much, just doing good practices. And other times it can be difficult. So if we have trauma, we have a whole series of kind of very negative and bad events that happen to us, it's not going to be surprising if our energy gets stuck. And we don't want that, because we need this energy to be flowing optimally, especially for witches or other magical practitioners, because we need to raise great amounts of energy in order to perform, our magical work, whether that is, in the mind, or whether that is out physically. We need to raise energy. So breath work, because it moves prana through the body, that's just the definition of it, through the nadis, or the energetic channels of the body, it is one of the best ways we can quickly break up these energy blockages. Now, there are many added benefits that have not a lot to do with magic, but I'm going to bring them up anyway, because we know that this isn't just compartmentalized, right? It's body, mind, spirit, for body, mind, witchcraft for a reason, because we look at the body, mind, and the spirit. So it calms our mind. A breathwork practice really can purify the mind and the body, purify the thoughts, really get rid of, remember I talked about all of those 80% of those negative thoughts. It can help get rid of those. And it helps us have more control over our emotions. It can strengthen our self-belief. All of these things are great. We are also more likely to have a spontaneous Kundalini experience when we are practiced at breath work. This is when the Kundalini energy, which is sleeping at the base of the spine, releases and shoots up through the main energy channel of the body and out through the crown. It's a magical experience. And we're more likely to have one of those when we practice breath work. So an unexpected bonus, and this is one that I found, is that it accelerates our magical and our spiritual practices and abilities. So I kind of found this out because as I was studying yoga, I began to specialize in breath work. I was taking a lot of trainings with breathwork teachers. And when I started doing this, just as in an effort to kind of practice what I was learning, I found that it up-leveled my spiritual practice like exponentially. And it's really one of the things that inspired me to start teaching and and bringing my teachings out to more people, because it was such a profound experience and it didn't take much to get there. It just took some of these simple breathwork practices. Now we can harness this energy. This energy can become very amplified during spiritual practice. We can harness this better if we're already practicing. So one of the things I tell people is that while you can use the breath work in magical practices to raise a lot of energy, that's great. But if you're also have a regular practice of this, you become even better at it, right? So this is, I think, truly what really made me up-level my practice. So why should a witch or a magical spiritual person have a daily energy or breathwork practice? So one thing is, like I mentioned, we work with large amounts of energy that we need to move from place to place. And the breath work or an energy practice can really help us hone that skill. Most people will admit that they don't have a daily energy practice like this. So just adding something simple in, like I'm about to show you, can really have profound effects. The energy exercises also work as like to prime the pump. So it makes it even more effective when you move energy, when it really matters. So like during spell work or magical practices. So just 5 to 10 minutes of this daily or almost daily, I would say, like trying to do it more days than you don't. Just 5 to 10 minutes of this is enough. You will be amazed by the effects that you see in your own practice. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of end here with 3 types of breath, and I will get into these in greater depth. And if you do end up joining my membership, which I'm going to talk about at the end, I'll go into a lot more depth into this breathwork practice as well over the course of the membership. Okay, so there are 3 types of breath. There is the cooling breath, there is the heating or activating breath, and there is the neutralizing breath. So the neutralizing breath, I'm just going to start with that first. It is a breath that can bring you to an even more centered state. So if you need to like ground, or you need to come into kind of bring yourself to the center, a neutralizing breath is a really good breath to use. Now there's a lot of different ones. So the one I wanted to mention tonight is called the healing square breath. Though I've heard there are a few other names for this. But I call it the healing square breath, and it's basically because we inhale for a count of 4, we hold that breath for a count of 4, we exhale for a count of 4, and then we hold again for a count of 4 before inhaling again. So like basically every side of the square is us either inhaling, holding, exhaling, or holding. So it's a really great breath, and typically we want to do it at a count of 4, but you could play around with that. You could do 3 or you could do 5, but you do want, for this breath, you want that to be even for each side of that square. And this breath, if you practice this, a couple minutes a day, you could work up to 5 minutes. It's very, very good for neutralizing the mind, helping clear out negative thoughts, and really helping to ground and center you. So I like this breath, especially at the beginning, like a beginning of a magical practice. Now, the second breath is the heating or activating breath. And this is a breath that is meant to move energy fast, quickly through the body, move it to different parts of the body, And this breath, I think, is the best one for getting the unstuck, back up. This is the best breath for really getting that stuck and stagnant energy moving again. So this breath is very good. These types of breath are very good because they work with the digestive system. They kind of work with the stomach as a pump that moves the air quickly through the body. And they're also really good for the immune system. So those are some physical benefits. But magically and spiritually, what I like about this breath, these types of breath, is that they move the energy so quickly, and we can actually use these in spell work. And so a good one here, is pretty much hands down, is the breath of fire. I've shown this one before. You can practice it by, if you've never done it before, I would say pretend like you're going to fog up a mirror, like your hand is a mirror. And put your hand on your belly and just feel that movement of the belly as it goes in and out. So it's an active inhale, it's a passive exhale. So we're actually longer on the inhale and shorter on the exhale, which is why it's so activating. So once you have that feeling, then what you do is you close the mouth and you do this just through the nose. Now, that breath is more difficult than the healing square breath I mentioned. So if you're new to it, I would start with like 1 minute. Eventually you can work up to 5 minutes. That can be kind of challenging, but it's a really great breath. And then this one, if you master it and you know it really well, it's one of the best ways I've found to raise substantial amounts of energy inside a ritual or, to charge a spell or something. And then finally, there's the cooling breath. The cooling breath is just what it sounds like. It brings us down. It tempers the hot emotions like anger, anxiety. And it's also these breaths are actually quite anti-aging too. So there's this idea that as we age, we get like hotter energy sometimes. And this especially when we're kind of transitioning from being, young adult into our middle ages. This is a really good breath. These are really good breaths to kind of cool that energy down. But at the same time, they're also really good for, like I said, bringing down those emotions. So chirivriti is a word that means like the self-talk. It's just chatter in the mind. Remember, all the 80% of the negative thoughts and 95% of those repetitive thoughts, it's just that chirivriti. And so a cooling breath can actually bring that down. Any of the breaths can, but this one especially. So good cooling breath. I taught one last week, which was the Sitali pranayama. It's like we're breathing in through a curled tongue or sucking in air like through a straw. But tonight I want to talk about the Brahmari breath, which is also a cooling breath. So this is the bees breath. It's pretty simple. You just put your fingers to close your ears, and then you take an inhale, and on the exhale you just make a buzzing sound. And then you just repeat that again. Take an inhale. So it's an awesome breath because not only is it cooling, it brings down those emotions, it's also really good for the throat chakra. So if you need to go into a space where you really need to be able to speak, I love doing Brahmari breath before that. It really kind of brings up your confidence in your speaking abilities. It activates the throat chakra. It's great for the thyroid, good for anxiety. It's just an awesome breath all around. So those are my 3 breaths, one each of the neutralizing, heating, and cooling breath. And as we go further in, I'll be, talking more about the breaths in detail in future episodes. But I just wanted to give you a little taste of that for now. All right, so I'm just going to spend the last minute here talking about my new membership. So I had hoped to have the details of this out at the very beginning of this week. We had a death in our family and some issues that we had to deal with. So it's been kind of a crazy week, but I should be getting around to those on the waiting list tonight, if not tomorrow, with the details, so you can make a decision about whether you want in. So this is a membership where we will be working with shadow work, we'll be working with energy work, You know, in later modules, we'll probably do some dream work, past life regression. But at least for the beginning, our goal is to spend the first 4 months engaged in some really good shadow work. So this is a founding members launch of this membership, which means that I have created a lot of value here, and I'm keeping the price really low so that, you know, we what I really want to do is just thank everybody here who's helped me kind of launch all this and build this up and allow you to get in and lock in this low price for this membership. So what's included is a workshop. There's one workshop a month. There's one ritual a month. There's a week, in one of the weeks, there's an office hours where you can drop in and you can get advice from me or tell me, or we can talk about what you're working on. And I'll also be like teaching some other things in there as well. But it's a good chance to kind of get in there and get a little one-on-one time with me. And then there's also a set of alignment practices, which will vary from month to month. Sometimes it'll be energy work or breath work. Sometimes it'll be yoga or meditation, but there'll always be some kind of an alignment practice. And there's other perks and benefits as well. One of the most beautiful things about the being part of this beginning, it's not like this is version 1 that you're kind of in, but in a way it is. We're betaing this right now, and so as a founding member, you get to go through this with me. You get to help me shape the vision of where this group goes and this membership goes. So it's really special. I've been a member of a founding membership before, and it's just such a great experience. So I'm really excited to bring all of this to you guys. And our very first meeting is on September 10th, so that's next Saturday. So I'm going to be opening the doors to this at the end of this week with all the details, and then we're going to be closing the doors on, I haven't decided if September 8th or September 9th yet. The 9th worries me a bit because it's Mercury retrograde that day, so we might be closing on the 8th. But it will give people, you know, at least a week to kind of think about it and learn about the membership and decide if it's for you. And when we close the doors on the 8th or the 9th, we're not going to open them again for at least probably those 4 months at least. And when we do open the doors again, the price will be higher. Value will still be great. It's still great value, but the price will be higher. So if you read through the offer and you like what's there, I would recommend get in here as the founding member, because there's going to be a lot of perks that founding members are going to get. Let me think of anything else I was going to say. I guess that's about it. So I will be making some posts, and I'm actually going to go live a couple times in the group over the next week and just share with you details about everything. Also, if you would like, I'm offering complimentary like 10 to 15 minute connection calls this week on Zoom. So if anybody wants one, you can let me know and we'll book one and we can get on a call and you can ask me anything you want about anything, and I will tell you more about the membership, okay? So let me know if you want one of those. If you're already on the waiting list, make sure you check your DM. I'm probably going to DM most of you because you're coming through the group, or your email, but I will be, giving you the first chance to sign up as soon as the doors open. So before I sign off, one last thing I forgot, as I wanted to show you. Another way to work with the air element is through feathers. And so I have been going on all my different hikes. I have found different feathers, and some of the, I went in there to get them earlier off of the altar. I saw the cats must have gotten in there, but gathering feathers that you find on your walks or your hikes is an especially great way to work, with air. And I don't really know what I'm going to do with these yet, but there's so many things that you could do with feathers. And what I love about them too is when you bring in like the element of air, you can just wave the feather around you. It can even take the place of like a smudge stick if you want to like purify yourself with the element of air. All right, well, until next time, I'm going to sign off now. Have a great rest of your evening. Blessed be.